Latin American nationalism. We learned all about that. Can somebody tell me some countries that we learned about last week?
Nicaragua.
Nicaragua.
Haiti.
Argentina.
Haiti.
Haiti.
Nicaragua.
Okay.
Spanish. Against the Spanish.
Yes.
They hated the Spanish.
In Latin America, they're standing up against the Spanish, except for Brazil. Who did Brazil?
Portugal.
Who was Brazil standing up against?
Portugal.
Not the Spanish.
France.
So also during this time, there are three main big artistic movements that are happening in Europe. In the early 1800s, we have this thing called Romanticism. In the mid 1800s, we have this time called Realism. And in the late 1800s, it moves on to Impressionism. You guys don't have to copy all this down. If you just write early 1800s Romanticism right now, that would be perfect, because then I'm going to tell you about that. And then when we move on, you can write the next one. All right, do with nature and emotions and feelings and imagination, kind of like depicting dreams or how you would think something was going to look if it could be completely perfect. But it focused on supernatural things, exotic things, grotesque things. This is when Gothic literature also came to be. You guys know what Gothic literature is? Person. What are some characteristics of art?
Dark.
Dark.
Hey, there was a group of people that this has like goth that the word comes from.
Right.
Like Gothic architecture that they
Yes.
were made by.
Gothic architecture, when you think of, yeah, but you know, they're kind of scary looking writings. It's grotesque, it's horrifying. So at the beginning, this is kind of, at the beginning of the 1800s, I mean, this is the kind of expressions that are coming through in art. Which is interesting, right? Because this is when all the revolutions are beginning, right? See that it's bold, it's colorful, and it, well, not really colorful, but the colors that are used in it are expressed like, boldly is the only word I can think of that just said that. But, like it's emotional, it's very dramatic. What did you say, Nina?
Like the red is
Briefly last week about Beethoven and how he's also a romanticism artist, except not a painter, he's a musician, a composer. And it was also interesting about Beethoven, right, is that he's deaf by the age of 30, yet he still continues to compose music. Anyway, we're not going to listen to the whole thing, but just to listen to a little bit, hopefully it, you know, the internet works. So we know that, oh, I'm going to plug the speakers. So you guys have all heard this before, right? What kind of things do you hear this music in, like nowadays? Scary movies, right? And that's because it's this time period. And we're talking about horrifying things, bold things, 1800s. There's a shift towards realism in the arts, which means in literature and in visual arts again. So it's not just in paintings, that a lot of these artistic movements kind of get the rap that they're only about like paintings and pictures, but it's also in literature and music, again, in class. Before this time, artists were really only successful if they had a patron. Does anyone know what a patron is? Oh, right. Does anyone know what that means?
They like would support the artist. They pay for like the financial support.
Right. She still needs to make money, but people like me, or like the queens, aren't paying her to do things. So Nicole's painting what she wants to paint, and then has to try to sell it to the people this time, and that's called Impressionism. And this is artists that were mad about realism because they thought that art shouldn't be, art should be a way that people can express themselves. You can see it's kind of more whimsical. It's a little bit blurry, almost that you can interpret it as you want, but you still know it's like a woman walking through a map. As much literature and music as the first two, but it did have some. But it was just harder to, it wasn't as big of a movement as the first two. By using your notes, or from what you remember from what we just talked about, you guys are going to tell me what kind of art it is out of those three. Okay? Nope. Romanticism. Why?
Dark.
It's dark.
Someone raise their hand and tell me so that I can, hey John.
Because it's dark and like it shows emotion. And that's pretty much, and it's like it doesn't have that much color and it's sad.
Right, it's very dramatic. Very simple. There's not much to interpret, right?
The social classes.
Definitely shows the social classes. Well, that's not really what I mean.
It's more abstract.
Can you see the light though? The different places where they want you to see the light, right? Like over here in these three areas, and then the other kinds they're kind of dark. Like in the background is the woods, so there's not much light shown there. And that's what Impressionism tried to do, is capture the light at night. Apparently, these people are just walking down the road, so it's trying to capture a single, like second almost, rather than, I don't know, like a bloody scene like the Romanticism did.
Just because it's blurry.
I mean,
But it's not only that, it's like
Okay, Impressionism is against realism.
capture the light.
That's so
full name too.
And the colors.
Yep, definitely the colors. In the Impressionist painting stage on, you'd see much more brighter colors than this, so that's one thing that definitely differentiates it from that. And the drama in this compared to the Impressionist paintings, like if we look at the Impressionist paintings, yes, there's a lot of color. It's very simple. You can see there's
sad.
very sad, very dramatic.
Oh yeah, she is that. She is
The
that.
shovel.
There's
There's a shovel there.
The cross.
The shovel, you dig.
I lose
they're
the shovel.
putting
Yes,
her
there's a shovel. See, they're putting her into a grave. I think that's what's going to figure it out. I didn't really talk about any of the famous artists besides Beethoven.
Nope.
So you guys are going to get into 3 groups, and you're going to come up. I'm going to assign each group a different artistic movement. So either you're going to be Romanticists, Realists, or Impressionists, and you guys are going to use your computers and your book to research. So it could be pictures of paintings that we can put up here to talk about, or examples and samples of music and writing. And if one of you from each group wants to talk to me, we can use the teacher internet to do the YouTube stuff if you want to find a clip. And I'll give you guys, like 15, 20 minutes to do this, and then maybe.
It's like a presentation.
It's just a group work thing with a classwork. So you guys have to do this. Like I said, you don't. Paint really easy.